I'm not about musical entries, but I think this is appropriate because, you know, in this case, it is all about you. Something about the Raiders getting replaced made me think that All About You, for a pod that's all about the Raiders, needed to involve that song from Tupac. So maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm a little screwy in the head. These things happen sometimes. Oh no, RJ. What do you think? When you think the Raiders, do you also think a little bit about Oakland? And does that kind of take you to Tupac a little bit, or am I just completely off base here?
No, that's fine. Any West Coast artist is acceptable, but definitely think Oakland. They're still not a pro football team in Las Vegas in my mind.
I mean, I just I just feel for the city of Oakland because they had the Warriors, they had the Raiders, they had the A's. The Warriors have completely jumped ship over to San Francisco.
Hmm.
The A's and the Raiders have jumped ship to Las Vegas. It's, you know, just tough to be in Oakland. But hey, it's all about you, is meaning it's all about the Raiders. It's all about the Raiders because, look, we've had some ridiculous feats of strength that have happened in this league before of when people have joined. Like, as the draft is starting, as free agency is opening. Like some of these times it's happened and people have just had to scramble. This is definitely up there for one of those times. 24 hours until rosters lock and get ready for rollover. And oh, by the way, the team that he just took over has to deal with franchising and or trading Lamar Jackson. So, ow.
Yeah, that's a very unpleasant contract to have to deal with.
I mean, I guess the nice thing about it is because it's already 42.5 million. The Pro Bowl amount is going to be in the 50s, so it's not going to be like oh, I've got to go from 8 million to 50 million and find a place to find $40 million of cap. Like he doesn't have to do that at least, but he's got a lot that he's got to do here. So we thought it was only the right thing to do to first off say welcome to the league, Raiders, to basically go through a couple of things as a newbie might want to. No. So we'll go through some of the basics of the bylaws. We'll go through the stuff you got to get done in the next 24 hours. And we might even come up with some ideas for you. And I'm going to go ahead and say none of these are going to involve my team. So anything I come up with an idea for you to trade or otherwise, I have nothing to gain from it. So I don't want any kind of accusations of the otherwise, but I'm just trying to do what we can to help our new league member because he doesn't have a whole lot of time to get up to speed on this stuff. So, RJ, Giants, what do you guys think? Are you guys good with that idea that any ideas we come up with for Raiders is not going to involve any of the three of us?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So first things first. Let's talk about what's on the Raiders team. So the Raiders have perpetually been a team that has competed for a postseason bid. Last year, unfortunately, things kind of fell apart at the end of the year. Lamar Jackson is one of the most valuable quarterbacks in the league. Unfortunately, he's a $42 million quarterback coming up on the point where he has to be extended. So, considering his Pro Bowl performance last year, that's going to cost some money. So let's talk a little bit about some of the extension process here. So to extend somebody in our league, you have to have 2 years at least left on the contract, unless it's sometime earlier in the year, but that's not important for Raiders right now. So because he's going into his final year, if he doesn't extend Lamar Jackson now, he basically can't do it. He has to then trade Lamar Jackson, and whoever you trade them to can extend him next year. But if he wants to keep Lamar long term as his quarterback, he's got to do it. Otherwise, if he wants to trade him, he can either do it now or after rollover. But after rollover is going to be probably more difficult. So trying to figure that out with the franchise player is not easy. Rest of the roster, he's got a tough situation here. Charbonnet looked good in patches, but needs help. He can't carry a running game by himself. DK Metcalf, tough year last year, prime for potential renegotiation as well. But, got to figure out maybe you can trade him for more if you're trying to rebuild. And then some pieces on the defense. Josh Sweat, really good year, really great contract. And then Bernard from Buffalo, good and on the cheap, potential to extend that, but I think he's still on his rookie deal, so that might get expensive. A couple other decent pieces, but anything major that I'm missing for him really?
No, the biggest one that stands out to me is renegotiating DK. I think is the best option.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the three like must-do moves are extend Lamar, extend Bernard, renegotiate DK.
So let's take a look at what activities he has left that he can do. So the Las Vegas Raiders have 3 regular extensions and 1 renegotiation left. So real quick, what's the difference between those? If you go to the bylaws, you'll see the first thing that pops up when we get to the contract stuff is contract extensions in Section 6. Basically, that means that for a regular extension, you have to have the 2 years at least on your contract still, and you can add at least 2 years to the contract, but you can't go over 6. So in a case like Lamar Jackson, where you have 2 years left in the contract, you can extend him from 2 to 4 years and adjust his contract appropriately. Now, the table there below has the table for their rank last year and how much more of the contract you're going to have to pay them. The challenge here is if the player was in the top 3 of their conference in terms of our teams, AFC or NFC, or not 3, but within the position range of their conference, they qualified for the Pro Bowl. Pro Bowl players have a special consideration in the contract, which basically makes them a lot more expensive to renegotiate. Or to extend. So basically, to extend Lamar Jackson, you're going to have to pay him whatever Josh Allen's making, which Josh is making, what, $52 million right now was what Lions extended him at?
I'm trying to pull it up, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, it's 52.
All right. So basically, to extend Lamar Jackson, you would have to extend him between 2 and 4 more years, and it would add $10 million to your cap. You have $33 million of open cap space right now. That's not going to kill you. Plus, Jacoby Brissett can be cut. That's going to help with your cap stuff too. All right. So that's Lamar. Renegotiating DK Metcalf. So we just talked about the extensions. Extensions at 2 or more years are going to use the top of that table in Section 6. 3 or more years is going to use the bottom part of the table. Oh, I guess you can just extend 1 more year, can't you? So it's between 1 and 4, right?
Yeah, regular extensions can be 1 year.
Got it. Okay. So I apologize. It's between 1 and 4 years for Lamar that you can extend him, but because he's a Pro Bowler, he gets treated differently, and there's more information on that in the bylaws.
Yeah, he's a forced renegotiation, right?
One thing we should mention on the Lamar contract is just I wouldn't extend him beyond 5 years, right? Giving him a 3-year bump. That way you could theoretically renegotiate him next year if he had an off year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, I agree. I probably, like my assessment, I wouldn't do more than 2 years. I'd just take the chance that over the next 2 years he's going to not be quarterback 1. Because once we get into 5-year deals, those get kind of gross to deal
it'd
with.
be 5 years for a day, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
So
you're right.
Going into the rollover, it would be 4 years, like starting next year. Yeah.
Yep. So again, that's That's the key piece here. So renegotiation is the other thing that you have to do on your roster outside of making trades or things like that. So renegotiation, what it used to do was allow you to take a player on your team who had a down year and adjust his salary in line with what their performance was. So, for example, DK Metcalf last year only scored about 177 points. If I look at how that stacks up at the wide receiver position last year, let me pull that up. His average performance on the year
He was
was
wide receiver
38.
Yeah.
So
He'd be like
what a
$6 million
renegotiation
cheaper.
What's that?
Yeah, that was just I already did the math. He'd be like 8 million, 8.5 million.
8.5 million.
Yeah.
So basically, because he performed as wide receiver 38, you would pay him at the rate that the 38th best receiver was last year. The 38th best receiver. Wait, that can't be right. Oh, that's in terms of contract value. Never mind. The 38th biggest contract for a receiver last year was Devin Duvernay at $8.5 million. So basically, you would adjust DK Metcalf's contract to $8.5 million, which saves you a couple $1 million, which is a nice thing. Now, the rule up until this year was you could drop half the salary off of the contract.
At most.
At most. So, for example, if you were paying someone, I don't know, $117 million, if you renegotiated the contract, you could only bring that down to $58.5 million. And then if you needed to renegotiate them further, it would potentially take another renegotiation on top of that. So what do you need to renegotiate? You need to save some money, clearly, and you need to add at least 2 years to the contract. So basically, you're taking the guarantee, what you would do in a real-life renegotiation. You're taking money from the contract, you're putting it as a guarantee further into the contract. So, again, we're doing our best to simulate real-life football, and that's how a renegotiation would take place in real-life football. So, it's a tool to be able to manage your cap space and fix some of your contracts down. Now, that said, you're extending by adding a few more years to the player, so you don't want to make it to somebody who's, say, 37 or 38 years old because of another change that you need to look in the bylaws to see. So right now, if a player retires and there's a announcement that that player has retired, that player's cap can be removed from your salary cap considerations upon his announcement of that retirement. That rule is getting sunset, I believe, at the end of next season. So that said, if you've got big contracts that you think the guy's going to retire and then it's going to be gone, that rule is about to disappear. So extending big contracts way out there is about to get very dangerous and very expensive. So that's why the guys are saying here it makes a little bit more sense to keep the contracts in sort of a mid-range window, that 3 to 4 years, and give yourself the ability to renegotiate if they have a bad year. But at the same time, don't leave yourself completely holding the bag for a contract that's way out there. Now, the other side of the coin here is there's always a couple teams in a league that are rebuilding. And those teams are happy to take your bad contracts and eat cap for an improved pick or something like that. So it's not the end of the world if you're in a situation like this, but it's something to be mindful of because depending on the size of the contract you're trying to dump, people are going to want draft compensation for that. Think real life Brock Osweiler with the Browns and Texans a few years ago. Like, that's what we're talking here. Anything else about renegotiations we should mention?
No,
just to reiterate, yeah, you have to add 2 years. So like anyone who currently has 5 years, you can't renegotiate, but that won't be a problem for like DK, as we're suggesting.
Yeah. All right, and then the other extension that we're talking about here, Bernard. The special thing about him is he's technically still on his rookie deal. How do we know that? So if you go to your team page in the notes, and the notes are gone right now until rollover. Once we've rolled over, they'll come back. But if you look at Bernard on the notes, you'll see 22 rookie, 23 Pro Bowl. The 22 rookie indicates that he's still on his rookie deal. A first-round rookie pick. There is a 4-year deal that they get upon being drafted, and then a 5th-year option that you would need to pick up before you could extend that player. Bernard was not a first-round pick. Otherwise, it would have said 2020 first-round rookie or first-round pick. Like it says for Charbonnet, 23 first-round pick. Or 22 pick 105 for Treylon Burks. So first-round rookies get treated differently than second through 5th-round rookies in this league. So since he's a not first-round rookie, to extend him, you would have to treat him as a renegotiation. So that means an extension for Terrell Bernard would be in line with his performance as linebacker last year. So at 156 points, let's go ahead and look up what his performance was as linebacker last year. See, you guys ahead of me, or am I going to get this? So Bernard was linebacker 32. The 32nd highest paid linebacker last year was just under $10 million, $9.85 million. So to extend Bernard means you're adjusting his contract from just over $1 million to about $10 million, which again is a lot more expensive. But you're going to find in this league that cap doesn't exactly work the same way in our league as it does in real life football. The things you spend the money on in real life football, like corners and receivers and things like that, aren't always where the money ends up in our league. So don't lose a lot of sleep over having to pay linebackers here. There are some teams that pay for studs and then supplement with young players, and it works. Some people need to have a more well-rounded roster. Like, again, the Chiefs are the poster child of this process. If you want to see how that works, just look at his roster and be amazed, because he is constantly in the playoff hunt and championship conversation, and that's his team. Again, this is not a ding. This is not a ding on Goose. This is the players he puts together are not something that you would go into a rookie draft or a redraft league and say, God, I can't wait to get these players. But he's got 40 of them, and they put up points at different points in the year, and it works out. So, again, there's different ways to build teams here. There's not a one-size-fits-all. Figure out the way that you prefer to build the team and jump into it. But that said, Bernard, to extend him because he's on his rookie deal, would cause a jump in the contract from the 1.2 to a 9.8 to pay him and extend him longer term.
And that's like market rate for a well-performing linebacker. So and honestly, he underperformed this year. So I think that's fine.
Yep. Now that said, the other option to all of this is to either trade the players, and we'll get to that in a second, or you let it ride. Now, if you let it ride, when the player's about to expire, you've got a couple of options. You can franchise tag the player, and we have the exclusive and non-exclusive franchise tags here. And the full details on what those costs will be are in the bylaws and worth taking a look at. We also have transition tag for players as well, but only the non-exclusive franchise tag comes with draft compensation. So the transition tag allows you to hang on to a player, but there's going to be an auction for them, and you'll have to choose to retain them after that auction is complete. And you're probably going to have to pay a pretty penny for that player. Maybe not as much as the player would garner in market rate, but you're going to have to pay up to keep the player. You could do non-exclusive franchise, which allows teams to bid on that player, but if they win the player and you decide not to keep them, they have to trade you a first-round pick for that player. So, again, a lot of teams will non-exclusive franchise a player that probably won't garner a first-round pick in terms of compensation because they know you're not going to pay that. So, again, you'll see a little bit of the strategy in the process here, but that's what will happen there. And then you'll have the exclusive franchise tags where it's going to hang on to the player, don't want to deal with it, and move on to the next thing. So you got to figure out what's going to work for your team there in terms of whether you want to lock these guys down, pay Lamar and Bernard a little bit more, get the savings on Metcalf, or what you want to do there. Because If you trade the players, then you give the other team the opportunity to come up with the same ideas or the same process. Now, the other option, which has been less popular, but because of contract and because of other things, I think is going to become a more utilized route to do this. And that's actually letting the player hit free agency. Because this league awards comp picks, or compensatory picks based off of the quality of the player that left. Now, usually that's for a player who is a pure one-year wonder or a aging veteran or at a position where there's just a massive depth of players. You'll see in the extension and some of the other bylaws that there are different considerations for defensive tackles and corners when it comes to comp picks than every other position. Because that situation in terms of how corners score in this league, you can find a corner who basically just gets picked on a ton in an offense, and that player may end up performing as a top 10 to 15 corner in our league because we give points for passes defense, tackles, things like that basically award you for being in the action. If you're a shutdown corner and everyone's trying to avoid you, you don't score great in our league. Which is why when you look at our league and you're like, hey, great corners, wait, where's Sauce Gardner? He's not a high-scoring corner in our league because offensive tend to avoid him. So, again, keep an eye on what's on there. But the thought here also is you can let a player walk to free agency and get a compensatory pick. Again, read the rules on this because at max you get a third, a fourth, and a fifth. You don't get multiple in those rounds. If you have multiple that qualify for that round, it rolls to the next lowest round. So it's a nice way to pick up some potential extra draft compensation for players you don't intend to sign. But you can't stack and say, oh, I'm going to pick up 3/3 because I have 3 top 15 players hitting free agency. No, you get a third, a fourth, and a fifth. So take a look at the team and think about, is this a player I want to potentially extend, a player I want to renegotiate, a player I want to tag, or a player I want to trade. Now, when you're looking at trades, general rule of thumb, a good place to look at what sort of valuations are going. If you go to the main page, scroll down, you're going to see the 10 newest transactions list. Go to view all transactions, sort show me, and then trades, and then just look at the last, call it 300 days. That's going to be a shit ton of trades. I look back on that. That's basically all the trades that happened this year, and there's close to 500 of them. Now, that said, some of these are going to be taxi squad claims or stuff like that, and not worth looking at. But you'll get a general idea of how the league looks at contract dollar value and length in terms of what the cap impact of a player is going to be, the point performance of a player, and the age of a player, and also the value on picks. And look, if you're in this league, I'm going to assume you have a basic knowledge of how fantasy football works and the cycle of, as we build the draft, everyone's going to want rookie picks more and more and more and more. We'll hit the draft and everyone's really going to want a rookie pick, and then nobody cares if you have a rookie pick after that. But those rookies are obviously still worth something because they're all going to be starters and they're all going to be making the Pro Bowl next year and they're all going to score 400 points. But again, I'm going to assume you have a basic knowledge of how the rookie cycle works. If you don't, man, whoever talked you into this league is not your friend. I've been talking a lot. RJ, Giants, anything you guys want to add to the conversation here?
My suggestion would be, after scrambling to do a handful of the things that we've suggested as far as addressing contracts, take your time. Definitely look over those trades, but just take 3 weeks and basically don't do anything except maybe bid on some stuff for tags once that's up, but just ease into it. There's a lot to consume in this league and a lot to try to understand. So just don't get too crazy. Don't react too fast. Just drag your feet on a couple of things. Every day that you see like how trades go or like how we interact with each other will just give you a better insight onto like how things are done.
And also, don't be shy of asking people.
Yeah.
Obviously, if somebody sends you an offer, don't ask them, is this fair? Because they won't reply objectively. Again, we're all relatively decent people, but, don't ask us to negotiate against ourselves. But anyone who's not in the deal will usually give you their 2 cents on it. Like,
Yep.
People ping RJ, myself, Giants probably. I again, can't speak for, but I imagine. And others just to kind of get their 2 cents on, hey, what do you think about this offer? What do you think about this deal? And if we're around, we'll give you our 2 cents. I mean, happy to do it. But I think RJ's got the right idea. Again, you don't have to go on a 3-week hiatus, but if something looks too good to be true, ask first. If something makes sense, again, ask as well. Just kind of say, hey, this makes some sense. Hey, somebody's giving me a late first and a second, like a future first and a second this year for Zach Charbonnet. Like, what do you think about that? Like, I would say that's probably relatively decent value. Others might say, hell no, hang on to that because Walker can't stay healthy. I don't know. You might have some difference in valuation on players, but you'll at least understand the why behind the what a little bit better. And that's really what RJ is pushing for, is so you understand the valuation of stuff in the league, so you don't end up in a situation where you're offering a first-round pick for cornerback 35 because he's a real-life shutdown corner, and you think that's where the value makes sense to go. And frankly, anybody who sends you that offer, please put them on blast. I like to think that we're not, here trying to take advantage of each other. And if teams are, then it is, in my opinion, more than reasonable to say, hey, here's an offer I got from this team so that we can all publicly mock that player.
That has become more acceptable in the past few years.
It's a damn shame.
It is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, it's the sunshine rule. Like, it's the old don't put anything in an email that you wouldn't be comfortable putting on seeing on the front page of the New York Times.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Like once it has left your control, you don't control it anymore, and whoever gets it gets to do whatever they want with it. Same thing with a trade. If you send a wildly lopsided trade, don't be butthurt if it ends up on the league page. And look, if it ends up on the league page and somebody puts you on blast and everyone's like, actually, that's a pretty fair offer, guess what? It's free publicity. Someone's going to say, oh, this guy's trading this player, and you might make a deal happen anyway. So, again, I have no problem with it. I know other people get a little sensitive about it, but just, I guess, personal feelings on the right way to do things.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add, and I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, Mike, is we have an extensive history, like even in the transactions for the last year, to help gauge values, right? So, like, if you get an offer for someone, like, let's say DK, right? You can look at the transactions, see what DK was purchased for, or see, like, if you have a player that you kind of comp similarly, see what he went for, and try and just, like, use some, like, best, like, tier analysis you can to try and see, like, what other folks have done in terms of value for these different kind of positions. So I would leverage that a lot. I do that a good amount myself. So that would be a recommendation.
No, don't use trade calculators as the end all be all. Use them as some type of a suggestion, but there's nothing that takes into account the things that happen in our league. Is that a fair statement?
How long we want to go? I think you can gut check offensive value 1-to-1 for fine, and just kind of do your best guess on contract stuff. I think it is still a valuable like piece of data, in terms of just like raw player value outside of like a contract.
That's
It'll
fair.
give you an idea. Yeah, it'll give you an idea of the market.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily how that player values that, how that team values that player, but it gives you an idea of the average value in the market. So, again, recommended, use it for those purposes. Now, again, if you get called to the carpet as, oh, this trade was terrible and stuff like that, that's also a reasonable way to do it. Because, look, if you can show your work as to how you got to an answer, then, it doesn't matter. And frankly, if somebody wants to put you on blast for sending a terrible offer, completely their choice. But at least my perspective is, if you show your work and say how you got there, then the worst that's going to happen is somebody might say, okay, now I know, Giants takes a look at, this trade calculator before he sends offers. So if I find something in that calculator that, looks good to me, who knows? Maybe that means Giants might accept that one. Use the information that people give you. That's 101 here. Let's see. We've talked about the tags. We've talked about the contracts. We've talked about the extensions. We've talked about draft. So, like I said, difficult time of the year to join. So tomorrow, at some point, I believe midnight, not tonight midnight, but tomorrow midnight, things will lock in the league, which means that Jeremy, our commissioner, the Packers, and Chris, our co-commissioner, the Bengals, will start going through and getting the league ready to roll over to 2025. That means taking a year off the contracts, adjusting the contract value, cutting players that are still on your taxi squad or your IR. So, again, one of the things to make sure you get done is, if there's a player you want to save, activate them off of your practice squad or IR. If you don't care, go ahead and leave them there, and they'll get cut by the commissions. But again, the result of cutting those players will come back and hit you. So again, going back to the bylaws, if you cut a player, you still retain a portion of their cap hit against your cap based off of how many years are left. So if there's 1 year left, you eat half the cap this year that you have dead cap for that player getting cut. If it's 2 or more years, there's a tiered approach as to how that cap comes off of your long-term salary cap situation. And again, that's something to look at in the bylaws, and the future cap hits are tracked in the cap hits and extension section of the league page. So, for example, I am in the glorious situation of having $9 million of dead cap next year, which means for about $231 million cap, I'm going to be able to spend about $222 million before I start knocking off some of the contracts I will carry in next year already. So, again, things to think about as you're looking at, do I keep this player? Do I extend this player? Do I cut this player? Do I trade this player? Is what those contracts are going to do to you over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it looks like he already cut all his 1 year guys and elevated all his IR folks. So he's in a good spot once he does these couple of extensions and the renegotiation. I don't know who to use his third extension on. I don't really know that there's a great candidate, which is maybe okay if you don't want to extend someone and have them be more expensive for next year.
Was it Lamar and Terrell? Or
Yeah.
wouldn't you just extend Chuck Clark?
Yeah, I guess you could do Chuck Clark.
Keep him like right around $1 million, and
how old is he?
29, but you add another year, you basically probably have the rest of his career locked up at $1 million.
Yeah,
it's not a flashy
no, but it's a way of using it that's not like too costly,
right?
Yep.
The other thing I would say is don't be. I mean, we've had a number of different types of owners who joined in, and there's some who just like immediately make the team their own, like flip the whole roster, which is totally an option. There's some who just like sit on it, right, and just like really suss it out over the long term. Find where you're comfortable with, right? Like this roster has a decent amount of depth. I don't know what the draft situation looks like, but like there's certainly the possibility of him. He's got a first and a third. Like he could be competitive since he'd really just be going against Goose in that division next year. If that's the way he wants to go.
3 firsts in 2026. It's pretty decent.
Does he?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Well, when
nice
you're
little
ready,
treasure chest.
spend that capital. Yeah. Yeah, it was a nice little treasure chest. And 3 seconds. Yeah, nice. All right.
Yeah. So again, as Giants recommended, make the team your own, and there's lots of different ways to do that. So we'll do rollover, and then we'll have trading open back up for a little bit. Then we'll do tags, and then we'll get into free agency. And look, we'll get a little bit more into the refresh around free agency as we get a little bit closer to it, because I think it's not just you; it's a lot of people who need refreshers on that. And that's not necessarily the right thing to cover in an episode called All About You. So we'll go back to his roster here and see if there's anything else that makes sense. So if I already have a treasure chest of 2026 picks that I'm looking to build, the big challenge right now is a lot of those have already started getting consolidated by a couple of teams. So it's going to be tougher to get some of those. But even after you either renegotiate or extend some of the players, trading them is not exactly the worst idea, because your renegotiation or extension may make the prospect of that player, acquiring that player, a little bit more I'll call it tangible for some of the other teams. Let me just see who else could be interesting trade ideas. Like I said, Devin Duvernay was the 32nd highest paid receiver last year. Probably not someone you're going to add years to. Rasheen Ali got pretty well blocked out by Baltimore running backs last year. Whether he has better option this year is up to you.
He'll need to pick up Traylon Burks' 5th-year option if he wants. If he wants.
You could, but would you want to? Is that big old question.
It's a question he can think about all year. So, you can have him prove it, and if after a couple of games he likes what he sees, he can pick it up. But yeah, just something to keep in mind.
Am I crazy to say P. Ryan's a potential pre-rollover cut candidate? $10 million for 90 points. I mean, yes, it's running back, so that's probably running back 42 or something like that.
Yeah, it'll be 1 year. It's it's whatever. Yeah.
Well, again, it's $1.5 million or so, because I think it's 50% to 35%.
No. I'm saying cut him.
That's what I mean. So if you cut him before rollover, the $10 million drops to $5 million, and then next year you only have 2.5 against your cap. Instead of hanging on to him next year, letting his cost increase, and then cutting him at some point next year, and having $5 million against your cap, you save yourself potential $2.5 million.
Right. So he's the only one that stands out to me as a contract that I don't know if you just want to go into next year paying. So he might be somebody to just let go.
I don't know. I feel like you can maybe even flip him if he lands somewhere, pass catching running back.
No, that sure he might be able to flip him, but we're just talking about what might financially be a good decision in only having 24 hours to react.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I agree with what the guy said. I would extend Lamar and Bernard. I would renegotiate Metcalf, and then I'd probably try and trade all three. Lamar at $52 million is going to score a lot of points for you, and if you're trying to rebuild, you're going to want to shed some of those points. So you're going to see a lot of teams out there who either have cap space going into next year, or might have a combination of picks and cap space and stuff like that. And those are the teams to start with. So one of those teams is Dolphins. Fair warning. A couple of these teams have already positioned themselves to probably be bad next year. So it may not be something that you can do right now. Or you may have to wait till rollover to make the deal because that's when some of the cap pain comes off of everybody's situation. But
I think you should absolutely wait till rollover to do any trading because like it'll just massively open up your prospects.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, there's nobody that you're trying to trade because, oh, I can't keep this player or I am going to miss out on the opportunity to extend this player. I think anybody who's a 2-year going to 1 or coming off your roster already, you're taken care of.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're like in the Lamar business, right? Like that's going to be expensive. Move him before free agency, sure, when everyone still has all their money. But like, yeah, I mean, I think it just makes sense to wait. And again, that's another like a great example of like, look what. Will he have access to like the 2024 league page?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yep.
So like, go back and see what I sold Josh Allen for, right? Just to get a sense of like what a Lamar comp could look like. And if you like need help finding that, like who owned who or whatever, like we can always help you. But you can always just search by like player name after you like expand to the last 700 days or whatever.
No, and you changed hands a couple of times too, so you've got a
Yeah,
couple of different
that's
packages
true.
and a couple of different things you can look at.
Yep.
So let's see. Josh Sweat is someone we haven't talked about, but 4 years left on his deal. He's a real life free agent this year, right?
Yeah.
27 years old, solid thing here. You could probably get a decent pick. I'd say at least a top 50 pick back for Sweat, if not an absolute first next year. So multiple ways
I
to
mean,
make that
he's
deal.
about to get paid in free agency. Like I would not accept anything less than a first for Josh Sweat.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but there are definitely those who would see him changing teams and say, he's going out of the system that worked.
Well, the way Philly rotates their D ends is actually probably a positive. Then he might change teams. But yeah, I got you.
He could end up being like a journeyman, like Clowney, where he's always fringe defensive end, right, top 32, but like never superstar.
Oh, I think he's going to get a healthy contract.
Most likely.
Like what Montez Sweat kind of situation. Just because of his last name. No. I mean, Sweat was really good in the playoffs too. Like he definitely like ended the year on a high note. I mean, he was nearly the Super Bowl MVP. I'm pretty sure that he's going to get a long-term contract somewhere.
Yeah, I agree.
He's probably the best defensive asset on this team, and like probably top 3 asset overall, right? Like it's probably Lamar, DK, Sweat.
Yeah,
maybe Bernard.
Maybe,
yeah.
I think Bernard's good, but I don't know. We have hours of me rambling about how linebackers are replaceable.
Yeah.
Anyone else that you're seeing on here that makes sense to try and move? And again, like you guys said, none of this has to be done right now. The only things that have to be done right now are a couple of extensions we've talked about, renegotiation, and then if you want to try and acquire another extension and not just extend the player that you guys suggested, that's an option too.
I think Quincy Williams is another. We haven't talked about him yet, but $3 million linebacker. He's a little old, but like that's just a really good contract, right? A couple $1 million, for 150 plus point scorer, and sometimes way more, right? This is kind of a bad year for the Jets defense altogether, but I think between Bernard and Quincy Williams, you have a pretty solid linebacker core. You have a D1-ish in Josh Sweat. Like these are solid pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Quincy is similar to Josh Sweat, where like they are some of the more valuable defensive players probably in the league, just based on like the contract and the fact that they aren't going to go up to any crazy number unless they're a Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
All right. But again, you've got enough cap space, you've got some interesting pieces, and you've got some minimum work to do. So, look, getting to know this league is going to take some time. Getting to know the players in the league is going to take some time. There's plenty of us who are more than happy to help.
Yep.
All right. We had about an hour last night. We are 45 minutes in tonight. I think we've done our Lord's work here. We can move on to trying to make some final trades for our teams before we move on here. So, do you want to leave it open so teams can hear some of the things that we're trying to make moves for, or just get to it?
Let's go to voice chat, and then people can hop in if they want.
That's a good idea. All right, that's what we'll do. So, look, we said it was all about you, and it was all about you, Raiders. So, welcome to the league. If you have questions, shoot us notes. Again, the commissions are good. Bengals and Packers, Vikings, Eagles, and Giants. We'll give you our 2 cents. Again, just welcome to the league. Get to know what's going on here. And look, most importantly, you don't need to be crazy active. Some of us are degenerates and take this league way too seriously. But the worst thing in this league is when somebody joins and then doesn't respond to things, whether it's trade offers or messages or things like that. Like, look, if you're going to kind of check in maybe once or twice a week, that's fine. Just reply to offers when they come through or give some kind of feedback that you don't like, that kind of stuff. Like, just let us know what's going on. If we don't hear anything, we don't know anything, and we're just assuming you're blowing us off. And for some people, that's just egging us on. So, hot tip there, activity is great, but if you're not going to be able to be as insane with this as some of the rest of us are, no harm done. Just kind of give us the heads up. But until next time, good luck, everyone trying to finish out their year, and we'll catch you on the flip side. But we're going to move into the voice chat to see if we can make some business happen. So here's the good business.